Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of MDIC Live, where we highlight the latest happenings from within the Medical Device Innovation Consortium and around the medical device industry at large. Today, we're kicking off Season 2 with a special treat. In today's Leadership Roundtable session, we'll take a deeper dive into exactly what is MDIC, what drives the organization's work, how the organization works, meets the needs of the medical device stakeholders, and we'll take a little bit of a look into the future of the industry. Now, I know you're all excited to step into today's session, and I am too. But before we jump in, I want to remind everyone watching live from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn that this is an interactive session. So please leave your comments, questions, and all other commentary for today's guest in the chat. Your question just might be answered live at the end of the show. Now, please join me in welcoming for this episode, CEO and President of MDIC, Andy Fish, Vice President of Clinical Sciences and Technology, Joe Sapiente, Associate Vice President of Health Economics and Patient Value, Harry Kotlarz, and Director of Business Development and Partnerships and Interim Head of NESTcc, Richard Smith. Thank you all for being here with us today.
It's great. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you. And I'm excited to host today's session. And so without further ado, let's dive right in. And Andy, I wanted to start with you, and I think it's only fitting since you are our very first guest on MDIC Live way back in July. And we talked about in that session what makes MDIC unique and kind of the unique role that a public partnership like this one has in the medical device industry. So I kind of want to expand on that topic a little bit and give those that are listening today some insight into exactly who MDIC is. So, Andy, my question for you is, if someone were to ask you, what is MDIC and what does MDIC do broadly, how would you answer that question?
It's a great question, Devin. First, let me just say thank you for pulling this together. Thanks to our audience. We look forward to sharing a whole lot of oversight and insight into MDIC and look forward to taking some of your questions as we go along. But to answer your question more specifically and then to elaborate a bit, MDIC is a public-private consortium of an array of stakeholders all focused on bringing medical devices to patient care. And our mission is really to accelerate innovation and adoption in medical devices, to improve patient access, and to improve quality of care for patients everywhere. And what's unique about MDIC is the way we go about doing that. And there's really two aspects of what makes us different from other organizations and makes us effective in accomplishing our mission. The first of all is the public-private nature of what we do, right? So we described ourselves as a public-private consortium, which means that we have stakeholders who are both medical device manufacturers in the private sector, but we also have dozens of other entities that are nonprofits or not-for-profit organizations, such as patient advocacy organizations. And then also critically, we have government agencies that sit around the same membership table at MDIC and collaboratively work on common challenges in the entire process of medical device ideation all the way to bedside, right? To lower those barriers and bring safer, more effective medical technologies to patients faster. And FDA is a critical member of MDIC. And so one of the ways we do our work is we sit around with FDA, routinely scoping out what's coming next. What are some of the big challenges that are common pain points for manufacturers and regulators and numerous other stakeholders, and how do we address those challenges? But to step back a little bit in terms of you think about how we do our work, in addition to a collaboration, right, that brings everyone around the table as equals, we really focus our work in 4 areas. Our focus is on what we call regulatory science primarily, which means we are advancing the science and the technical disciplines that drive medical device development. And so I'll kind of talk about 4 areas of MDIC's work, and then my colleagues will go deeper into a number of these areas. And I think it'll become clear through this conversation what we mean when we talk about bringing down these barriers that exist, throughout kind of that life cycle and how that overlaps with the patient journey. So if you think about our 4 major areas of work, one is in quality design and manufacturing. We are constantly working on helping manufacturers improve and advance the way they design medical devices and go through a manufacturing process to de-risk that process from a quality standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint. And of course, that benefits manufacturers in terms of their own operations, savings and more effective operations, but it has downstream benefits as well in terms of bringing more reliable devices into the marketplace, bringing higher quality devices, constantly advancing quality for the benefit of ultimately of patients, right? So that whole area of quality design and manufacturing is absolutely critical to what we do collaboratively with industry and other stakeholders. Another key area for our work is in evidence generation. One of our key overall activities is in driving better evidence for decision makers, all the way from early decisions about what devices to develop and try to bring to market to the decision making that regulators are going through in terms of the evidence they're looking at. We help advance the science of evidence for regulatory decision makers. We're focused on developing better evidence for payers and making coverage determinations and payment determinations. And ultimately, all of this evidence also comes to bear in the decisions that clinicians and patients are making about what devices are right for them to address their own specific health situations. And maybe we could actually put up this overview slide that we have that kind of summarizes a lot of what I'm talking about, and I'll continue to speak to it as we go. So you can see here quality design and manufacturing, evidence generation. We go to a third pillar and we look at digital health. Right, we are advancing, accelerating the use of advanced data tools and new technologies to accelerate evidence development, bring down barriers to patient access, and better monitor safety, quality, and effectiveness. And we can go more into digital health, of course. And then finally, a fourth key area, which is absolutely essential to our work, patient engagement. We're advancing the science of patient engagement, bringing the patient voice into regulatory decision-making, bringing the patient voice into payer decision-making, and advancing the science of how do you actually take patient input, patient preferences, and turn that into data that's reliable and valid for decision-making in these different contexts. And to round out this, just my opening comments here, let me hit on a couple other points that are here in this slide. Right. So first of all, to elaborate on how we work. I said before, we're a public-private stakeholder collaboration. We bring subject matter expertise to these issues. We bring expert work groups together to source the best and the brightest across multiple stakeholders to address and tackle these problems. And we bring project management skills and expertise to these projects. What our output is resources, education, and training across our membership and beyond. And then ultimately, the result of the work that we're doing here are captured at the top of the slide, right? Higher quality devices, faster time to market, which means enhanced patient safety, enhanced patient access to innovative medical technologies. We're improving and constantly updating regulatory pathways to make those more efficient. And ultimately, as I said earlier, we're bringing better evidence to decision makers all the way along this life cycle for approval, for coverage, for utilization decisions. And the net benefit then is advancing medical technologies for better patient care, better patient outcomes, better health outcomes, supporting wellness and quality of life. So that's the overall approach that we're taking here at MDIC. It's what makes us unique, a different value proposition. And we look forward to presenting more on what we're doing, and ultimately want to make sure that we're inviting all of you to come and participate. If you're a medical device manufacturer and you're not a member, or you're from any other stakeholder that has an interest in medical device work, please follow up with us. We'd love to talk to you about engaging with us and potentially becoming a member. Devin, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Andy, for that great overview. I think it shows how wide-ranging the work that MDIC is and how many different areas that we hope to kind of have impact on or affect change within. I want to bring Joe, Richard, and Harry into this next portion of the conversation to dive a little bit deeper into some of the points that you made, or one point in particular, which was MDIC's goal in finding solutions to some of the key issues that are affecting medical device stakeholders. So Joe, I'll give all three of you a chance to answer, but Joe, I'll start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges affecting the medical device ecosystem, and how do you see MDIC's role in addressing some of those challenges?
Okay, well, thanks, Devin, and again, thanks for the opportunity. So as Andy mentioned, the work that we do really comes from our stakeholders, and we really listen to our stakeholder group through the collaboration. And so when you talk about some of those challenges, there's a very diverse group of challenges that we see, because our work really does cover the complete total product life cycle. So for example, in one area where we've reached out to our stakeholders, we've learned through our stakeholder conversations that CAPA, or the Corrective Action Preventive Action Program, is a real challenge for a lot of companies. And so a couple of years ago, we put together a CAPA pilot program, and that CAPA pilot program was really important for us to look at what are some of the struggles, what are the pain points. As Andy mentioned, there are pain points, and then what are the possible solutions, and then convening the working groups to put together to develop a solution. And what we've seen in that CAPA program now, and we're going to be releasing a white paper very soon on the summary of the pilot, is that through using existing tools that companies have within, like the risk management program, their corrective action and preventive action, their change control process, they can actually de-risk their CAPA process and make it more efficient and more effective. And what that means is that they can actually bring higher quality, safer product to the market faster by leveraging this risk-based approach, or this de-risking of their CAPA program. Another example that we saw where companies that are in that early stage of product development and they're looking to do early feasibility studies, they struggle with understanding what are the processes, what are some of the pain points. And so the early feasibility toolkit that was developed years ago by MDIC and we continue to leverage it, is a toolkit that gives folks the opportunity to use templates and processes for streamlining patient engagement, patient approval or consent, developing that standard template or that standard contract, so to help navigate through the contract and the negotiation fee process, so that you can get to actually treating patients, so you can get to that process faster. So we continue to leverage that toolkit in a number of ways, and we look to expand our toolkit along, into broader technologies or to broader solutions. A couple of other areas when companies are struggling with cybersecurity, we all understand the concerns with cybersecurity and how cybersecurity is a real threat, and those threats change and can change every day. We've created a number of tools within the cybersecurity work stream, including a threat modeling boot camp and also some materials that you can use to help make your cybersecurity program more robust within your organization. And so leveraging lessons learned, use cases, and where companies have seen success of implementation, others can learn and again improve their programs overall. Another area that comes to mind is how companies, and Andy mentioned the quality manufacturing and design area. We've seen a tremendous impact on the work that we've done in the voluntary improvement program, where companies have really embraced the concept of continuous improvement within their manufacturing operation, and how they can leverage those steps in improving their overall processes internally, improving the product quality, getting the products to market faster, recognizing revenue sooner, so that companies are really benefiting from the tools that we've helped create. But the tools that we've created has to come from the work that we do with our strategic partners and our stakeholders, because they're the ones who are volunteering their time to be part of that working group and creating these solutions. With that, I'd like to maybe move on to maybe Harry, and have Harry talk a little bit about the things that he's doing in the value group.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks, Devin, for this opportunity. So the Health Economics and Patient Value work stream hosts two work groups. One is on real-world evidence, and the other is on patient preferences. Both are focused on the underpinning and informing of payer coverage decision-making. We work with a variety of different MedTech industries, both large and small, and patient advocacy organizations. And most significantly, we have participation from CMS's coverage and analysis group. We focus on best practices from our members, such as the opportunity with coverage with evidence development at the recent MedTech meeting, the evolving role and importance of the voice of the patient with payers as well as other stakeholders. We bring in subject matter experts who advise our individual groups and help us again inform and underpin payer coverage decision making. And most significantly and most topical at this point, as we wait for CMS to provide us with notice and comment rulemaking for transitional coverage for emerging technologies, that collectively will make a significant difference on an accelerated approval pathway, important for patients, important for the MedTech sector. So let me turn it over to Richard Smith. Richard's going to elaborate on the NEST Coordinating Center, the initiatives that they're leading to advance the innovative use of real-world evidence.
Thanks, Harry, for NESTcc. And for those of you who may not know, the acronym stands for the National Evaluation System for Health Technology. Our primary focus is around real-world evidence, generally referred to as RWE, and generating that through real-world data, or what's referred to as RWD, to support medical devices across their total product life cycle. And in this area, the biggest challenge for our stakeholders is really navigating the complexity of understanding what RWD can and cannot be used for, and assessing its fit for purpose. So NEST is taking a leadership role by collaborating with the medical device ecosystem to develop frameworks along with an infrastructure for evidence generation using RWD as an independent nonprofit entity with a close relationship with the FDA. As for our initial impact at the end of last year, the RAND Corporation published a paper on the first 21 test cases that we did to prove out some concepts using RWE. And we've issued that out into the stakeholder environment. But more importantly, we're using that as the foundation for improving the NEST infrastructure as we generate RWE. So Devin, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for outlining all of the different challenges that you all have identified through your various work streams. It seems like MDIC is very active in finding solutions across the total product lifecycle for its stakeholders. So that's definitely good to see. I think the question from there for me becomes, with the plethora of challenges that exist in the medical device industry, how has MDIC decided to focus on the areas that it's focused on, and why have we decided to focus in those particular areas? Joe, I'm going to start that question again with you.
In a lot of cases, the work that we do really does come from the needs of our stakeholders. And when you think about the areas that Andy mentioned in terms of quality design and manufacturing and evidence generation, digital health and patient engagement, those areas are really go across the entire product lifecycle. So a number of companies will have challenges within those areas. So again, through the public-private stakeholder collaboration that Andy mentioned earlier, we will sit with our stakeholders, we'll talk to them about what their needs are, we'll develop a strategy around what's the work that we're trying to do, what's the problem we're trying to solve, how are we going to solve it, and then ultimately what type of resource would be best suited to help others sort of learn and then implement those resource tools to help improve the entire ecosystem. And so it's through that the subject matter expertise, it's through those working groups, it's through the project management that we then convene our working groups and our stakeholders once we've identified what the challenge might be. And we've touched on things within quality and design. You heard about evidence generation and some of the challenges there. So how are companies using real world evidence to streamline their submission process? And we saw that in the conversion of EUAs into 510Ks during the COVID pandemic, where companies were taking those emergency use authorizations and then looking to convert them and using real world evidence. And that transcends and crosses over to the work that we've done in the other groups, because when you think about evidence generation, it's and I'll look at Richard for a moment, is that fit for purpose. And so how can we help educate our stakeholders on what and how to use that data, or how to plan to use that data going forward? And so this is one of the areas that we see as an opportunity for us to continue our engagement with companies around those challenges that really come to again, moving technology to market faster, overcoming some of those challenges within the ecosystem, and how do we engage in that? And as Andy mentioned earlier, it's through that engagement, it's through that collaboration where we've identified the opportunities in the work, and then we generate the resources, and then we drive adoption and awareness of the work that we've generated. So Harry, I think if you like to touch on that as well.
Thanks very much, Joe. So I hopefully, as you all are seeing, we collaborate across our various work streams, and similarly, we feel that there's a terrific opportunity for MedTech companies to consider evidence generation company-wide and to embed RWE as an enterprise-wide strategy. So cross-functional collaboration, it leverages RCTs, RWE approaches to meet the evidence needs of multiple stakeholders that includes providers, regulators, and payers across that entire product lifecycle. And as a result, this enables companies to look at evidence planning holistically, making strategic choices and using resources efficiently. Our goal within the Health Economics and Patient Value Initiative is to help inform Medicare, to help them with creating an accelerated approval pathway with the use of real-world evidence, as well as prioritizing patient engagement and the evolving role and importance of the voice of patients in the form of patient preference data. So again, collectively, we're embedding RWE as well as patient engagement. Our goal is across industry organizations, and our white papers are authored by our members. Our members include industry health economics outcomes researchers, reimbursement professionals, as well as representatives from CMS's coverage and analysis group. So our white papers include best practices and learnings, but it's also very much a collaborative and shared opportunity. And I'll just reiterate that pitch that Andy made. There's always an opportunity for more volunteers and diverse representation within our work groups. Richard, if you'd like to elaborate on the work that NEST is producing, that would be great.
Great, thanks a lot. And I would just echo what Harry and Joe have said. One of the great things about Andy coming on board has been that we are really trying to be synergistic in our approach. And I think the way that Andy is leading the organization, we're really trying to leverage a lot across the different disciplines within MDIC. Now for NESTcc, we're a little bit of a different initiative because our work was really envisioned through a process of several working and planning groups over about a 5-year period. And they included the Duke Margolis Center, the Brookings Institute, and other stakeholders such as the FDA. And ultimately, our initial goals were formalized through the MDUFA process. For those of you who don't know what that acronym stands for, it's the Medical Device User Fees Amendment. And it's a process that the FDA and industry go through every 5 years about how to spend a certain amount of money that comes into the agency through the application process. So our work to date was defined through that process, MDUFA 4 specifically, and we're initially focused on the use of RWE in the pre-market regulatory space. And the good thing about this process is that industry and FDA were involved in setting our goals. And as I mentioned a little earlier, we put this infrastructure in place along with frameworks that anyone can use, but we have the infrastructure that if someone brings a sponsored research project into NEST, we use through the infrastructure that we've been learning through over the past 5 years. And so as we pivot from MDUFA 4 to MDUFA 5, we're now extremely focused on implementing the learning that we've had and really opening up for wider sponsored research for industry. So with that, Devin, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. And thank you for helping us understand kind of why it is that we've decided to go into some of the particular subject areas that we have. I want to shift our conversation from why into the how. And how is it that we present our work? How is it that we engage our stakeholders? And so, Joe, of course, I'm going to start this question again with you. In what ways or how does MDIC engage its stakeholders to generate the impact that we're hoping to create?
Thanks, Devin. So you'll see that a number of the ways that we share our information, share the resource material is through webinars and training events. And you'll see coming up, actually, we had a cybersecurity boot camp recently. We'll have more of those throughout the year, focusing on the threat modeling, as I mentioned, how do organizations essentially build a strong, robust cybersecurity program within their organization. We have early feasibility events throughout the year, and you'll see a number of those where we try to leverage other events that are hosting. For example, we just came out of the Boston event on where we hosted an early feasibility workshop, and we'll continue to do a lot of those. We have patient forums that we've done every year, and there'll be another one this year where we bring in patient advocates to talk about their experiences with product development, post-market, and post-experience with products. That's important because as we talk about patient engagement, we're looking to really be recognized as the go-to company or a go-to place where industry and patients can engage in and resolve issues in product development. So we're looking to host more and more events there. And then we have our annual meeting coming up in September. But throughout the calendar, you'll see things showing up for Case for Quality. We're planning a forum event in Case for Quality this June, where we're going to be highlighting a number of areas within the Case for Quality, and including the Leadership Engagement Program, which is a playbook on how to drive quality culture through your enterprise. So it's really, again, as Andy mentioned, that developing those resources, developing the materials, and then driving adoption and awareness. And awareness is through those public-facing meetings and events like this. And you'll see more live events, MDIC live events, where we'll be highlighting a lot of these other areas within the clinical science and technology group.
Okay, thank you. So that gives us a good overview of what ways the clinical science and technology groups engage their stakeholders. Harry, I'll pose the same question to you. How does HEPV, or health economics and patient value, engage its stakeholders to generate impact?
Thanks, Devin. So I'll echo what Joe has said. Beyond the publication of white papers by subject matter experts and virtual forums, look for an announcement soon about MDIC's annual public forum, where a lot of these activities are going to be focused and concentrated on with workshops and presentations. But beyond that, we've spoken about the importance of prioritizing patient engagement in the context of payer decision making. And so with all the work, the foundational work that MDIC has done in this area, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to build awareness and appreciation of the value of patient engagement and patient perspectives in establishing successful business models for driving growth. And we're taking a step back. We're going to take that great information, and we're developing a series of webinars that are going to be published on MDIC's website that'll be made publicly available to our members as well as other stakeholders. But again, it's to take that great foundational information, help stakeholders understand the significance, the importance of patient engagement early on, not just in the regulatory, but in the coverage process as well.
Thank you. And so, Richard, I'll pose the same question to you. In what ways can we expect NESTcc to engage its stakeholders to generate impact?
Thanks, Devin. We engage with the medical device ecosystem through a number of ways. I mentioned earlier the frameworks. We basically have two subcommittees made up of stakeholders across the ecosystem. One's for research methods and the other for data quality. And both of these frameworks are focused on using RWD to generate RWE for the support of medical devices. NESTcc also hosts a collaborative community recognized by the FDA that's open for anyone to join, and it allows the members of the community to engage on the challenges of using RWE in support of medical devices. And out of that work, we initiated a project on implementing UDI, or unique device identifiers, at the point of care, and we'll be releasing a playbook that will be coming up, and we have a forum that will, I think, put up some information about that will happen a little bit later this month. But most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, NESTcc is now offering sponsored research to industry using our research network and the frameworks that we put together. And we refer to the program as our quality evidence by design. So if anyone out there listening has an interest in using RWE for their device, please reach out after the program. So back to you, Jeff.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate or highlight rather some of the upcoming engagement opportunities that you all mentioned, including the annual public forum, which will be held in September, our annual patient forum, highlighting patient engagement practices. Harry, you mentioned a great patient preference information webinar series. And of course, Richard mentioned the UDI or Unique Device Identifier webinar, which will be taking place next month. So all great opportunities to engage with the work that MDIC and NEST are doing collaboratively. And we hope that you all will join us, and stay tuned for more information around those. So in the spirit of looking forward, I want to get us to kind of the final part of our agenda, which is we talked about what MDIC is, why we do the work we do, how we work, but let's talk about what are some areas that we hope to see MDIC grow, or how this organization can continue to develop from here. So I want to bring you to talk to us about what are some areas that you hope to see MDIC grow, and what does that growth look like?
Yeah, thank you, Devin. So let me call out a couple different things as we look to the future. One of which is we're going to continue to put an additional emphasis on what Joe and others already called out, right? Which is the resources, the education, and the training that we can provide. If you come to our website or participate in our various programs, you'll start to get an understanding of the depth and quality of what we already have in our overall portfolio. But we want to make sure that we're increasingly playing a role in helping folks actually understand how to use those materials, whether it's within a manufacturing company or to apply it with their own constituents and their organization. So you'll see us doing more and more work on that side of the equation, right? Which is to put out the great products, the insightful materials, the helpful toolkits, right? The templates, the use cases, but also additionally, continue to train folks in how to actually use those and drive transformation within their organizations, right? So that's one area in which you'll see us continue to, expand and improve that what we're doing as MDIC. Another area for continued focus for us is patient engagement. I mentioned earlier that we have programmatic engagement in terms of advancing the science of how patient input is incorporated into regulatory decision-making, incorporated into payer decision-making, but we want to increasingly be a place where patients can figure out how to, and we can provide a platform for engaging with medical device manufacturers and vice versa, right? The industry that we represent among our various members really wants to authentically learn from patients who are using their devices or may use their devices in order to produce better devices from a patient standpoint. So we want to increasingly be a place where we can foster that direct collaboration, and we look forward to continuing to build out that capacity. And finally, I'll say we're thinking as well about how do we have an influence globally? We don't have immediate plans to be outside the US, but a lot of the work we're doing is equally applicable to other systems, other countries' regulatory systems, manufacturing going on in other places all around the world. And so we increasingly have an eye out to what the global ecosystem looks like and how the materials we're already doing can be adopted in other places. And we want to make sure that our materials are accessible to partners outside the U.S. And so I think, look to us to increasingly engage with stakeholders that will help bring the work that we do outside of the U.S. and help improve the ecosystem globally for patients everywhere.
Great. And I'm looking forward to seeing how MDIC brings greater awareness to some of the educational resources that it already has, as you mentioned. Joe, what are you looking forward to seeing MDIC growing into or expanding?
So, what we've done, and as Andy's mentioned, the way we interact with our stakeholders, we've come out of a few strategic planning sessions, and some of the themes that we're hearing is, interoperability is an area that is creating a lot of interest in the area of health equity, which I know we've talked about internally, and Andy's already talked about the patient engagement piece, as well as some of the other areas that we've already had, but we see growing opportunity within even computation modeling and simulation, which is an area that we actually have a webinar coming up at the end of this week on further expansion of computation modeling and simulation. That webinar is, I think, scheduled for tomorrow. But what we've heard from our stakeholders, and this is the strategic planning process went through all of the areas within our clinical science and technology. And so we heard things like interoperability. We heard things about health equity. We heard things about patient engagement and real world evidence. And those are the things that as we look at where does MDIC play best within those other, how do we become sort of the go-to company for a lot of these areas? We also are making sure that we include that crossover that we've talked about. How does interoperability cross over into the things that Richard's doing and the things that Harry's doing? And I'll give them an opportunity to talk about some of the things that they're hearing as well with regard to how we're continuing to grow.
Harry, starting with you.
Sure. Thanks, Devin. So the focus of health economics and patient value is looking at RWE and patient preferences in the context of payer decision making. We've been very fortunate to have representatives from CMS participate actively within our work groups, provide guidance, provide our work group members with direction on these areas. What we're lacking and what we have invitations out to some members for is commercial payer engagement, as well as health technology assessment organizations. They also represent the voice of payers, and we'd like to invite them to the table to participate and help increase the transparency of whether it's real world evidence or patient preference data in terms of both its collection and impact to coverage and health technology assessments.
Richard, moving to you.
On the NEST side, the thing I'm the most excited about are kind of twofold. One is with the NEST initiative, I'm extremely excited about taking what we learned on the MDUFA 4 work that we did over this 5-year period, where we took the test cases, built an infrastructure, and ran it through a network that we put together. And all of the learning that has come from that, I think, is going to create efficiencies and really allow the standardization of the use of RWE. And really, NEST's goal here is to build out a nationwide infrastructure and work in partnership with the FDA and the OHTs about how RWE can actually be realized. So that, from a NEST perspective, is where things, I think will be focused on the next couple of years. But more importantly, it's, as Joe mentioned, it's about this synergistic approach on how are we going to leverage our work. There's things that Joe's team is doing in the early study feasibility, first in human type work that RWE can inform. And so when we have sponsors who want to bring a project in to use RWE, we can point them to these tools that have been put together and really build out that first feasibility study with in mind how it's going to play out in real world and how real world evidence can support it. So I just think that we're catalyzing a wonderful opportunity for the ecosystem across MDIC over the next few years.
Agreed. And it sounds like there's no shortage of exciting opportunities or exciting growth areas that we can see MDIC expanding into within the next couple of years. I think that's a great way for us to end our discussion here today. I want to thank you all for your time and for sharing with us exactly what MDIC is, what MDIC does, and sort of the motivation behind the work. And of course, for being our first guest of season 2. It's always a pleasure. And I enjoyed having this conversation with you all here today.
Devin.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you. And so for those of you that are watching us here, I want to say thank you all for joining live for the season 2 kickoff. For any more information on some of the programs that you heard or for membership opportunities, please be sure to visit mdic.org and be sure to join us for upcoming episodes of MDIC Live. Until next time, thank you, and I'm signing off. Thanks.